I've been trying to formulate ways to convince people we need altruism out of politics, right? And that individual is free to be altruistic on their own. Uprooting the idea that altruism is a function of society is difficult. Any tips? Well, I don't think you can succeed. That is, I think you're approaching it wrongly. The approach needs to be that altruism is evil. Evil for the individual to do. That is, if you got altruism out of politics, it would still be evil for individuals to do it. Now, it would be good because they wouldn't be forcing you. In that sense, we'd be in a better position. But you see, as long as people think altruism is the good, and it's okay for them to practice it, not okay for them to practice, it's right for them to practice it, then they will have no problem ever in the government forcing you to practice it. Because altruism is not concerned about you. And if you are going to be better off by the government forcing you to be altruistic, then the government will force you to be altruistic, and that's fine. What you have to challenge is not the politics. It's the ethics. What you have to challenge is not whether the government does it or not, but whether anybody should do it. Only when you convince people that altruism is wrong in and of itself, that altruism is a wrong moral code in and of itself, will it exit from politics. You cannot separate it out. You cannot deal with politics as if it's a separate unit of knowledge unattached to everything else. Politics is the consequence of morality. If you don't challenge the morality, nothing will change in politics. And this is why conservatives fail, because they accept the morality of altruism. This is why nothing ever changes. This is why libertarians can't succeed, because they accept the morality of altruism. So you have to challenge the morality. Okay, do you think it's altruism or is it self-interest that wealthy countries should prioritize donating COVID vaccines to poor countries? I mean, it's certainly, there is a self-interested angle to it, which is, if we can get people in other countries vaccinated, it's less likely that new strains arise that they can override our vaccines. Although there's no proof that that will happen or that has happened. But why are governments buying vaccines to begin with? If you want to donate vaccines to poor countries, then do it. But why are governments doing it? And what is the justification? It's basically all altruism. Sometimes defended on a self-interested nationalistic basis because of this idea that strains can evolve. But the vaccines are so effective so far, even against strains that have already evolved, that seems like a lame excuse just to cover up the altruism. Okay, guys, we're probably at around $200. We need another 200 to reach our $400 goal. So hopefully we'll get a few more Super Chat questions that'll jump in. Maybe $5 is not going to help us that much. Is the suffering of self a side effect of altruism or the purpose? I think that altruists would say it's a side effect. But when you actually look at their motivations, it looks like the purpose. And for example, the best example I give is the thing that actually reduces suffering in the world, actually helps the poor, actually benefits people the most, is freedom. It's capitalism. Any honest person could see that. So why are altruists advocating for sacrifice? Why aren't they advocating for Bill Gates to invest his money rather than give it away when investing his money is going to help poor people even more? Because what they really want is his suffering. Why is Bill Gates, even though he's a big philanthropist, not considered a good guy? Because he's still rich and lots of influence. And I say the only way to make Bill Gates a saint, a good guy, is for him to live in a tent and bleed for us. The bleeding is what makes him a good guy. So yes, the altruist goal ultimately is your suffering. That is ultimately the purpose. Even though they won't admit it. They won't make it explicit. All right, do secular altruists carry over the Christian standard of suffering from Christianity, or do they have their own reasoning? They pretend to have their own reasoning, but really what they're doing is just rationalizing Christianity. They're just rationalizing the standard of suffering from Christianity. So the evolutionary psychologists will say, well, we evolved to be altruistic. That's the biologists say that. We evolved to sacrifice. And they purposefully conflate altruism with trade. Right? Look, we trade, we benefit from one another, therefore we should be altruistic. No, we should be traders. We should be self-interested traders. That's what works. Let's see. Okay, somebody's supporting Ali's arepas. Work or starve won't be an acceptable political position for another 50 to 100 years. Yeah, probably. The fact is that freedom today, the way people think of it today, is freedom from constraints, including metaphysical ones, including the constraints of nature and the constraints of biology. They want to be able to do whatever the hell they feel like doing. They feel like doing. And we've raised a whole generation that places emotion above everything else, including above metaphysics, the metaphysical fact that you have to work or starve. Okay, let's shift to some of the previous $20 super chats, because now we're getting off topic. Let me see. Frank just put in $50. Thank you, Frank. Do you think people are hiding themselves from the world when they advertise their altruism? Any thoughts? Hiding themselves from the world? I don't think they're hiding themselves from the world. I think in some sense they're hiding themselves from themselves. I think that the altruism is a attempt to convince themselves that they are moral. They're announcing to the world as an attempt to commit themselves to being moral. It's also an attempt, the more vocal they are, the more it's an attempt to undermine their own values. I really want that Lamborghini, but morality says I should give the money to Africa. So the way I can commit myself, the way I can force myself not to pursue the Ferrari is if I make a public commitment to give it to Africa. So they're looking for ways to be moral. They're looking for ways, and what this leads to is subversion of their own values. They're looking for ways to subvert their own values because their own values are selfish. And they know that selfishness is not moral. So I think that's the way they're hiding themselves. They're hiding their values. But it's primarily from themselves. People talk about virtue signaling. Like people say these things because they're virtue signaling. But who are they signaling to? I think the primary signaling they're doing is to themselves. Yes, they're signaling to other people because they're second-handed. They want other people to think well of them. But they're also signaling to themselves. They want themselves to think good of themselves, right? They want to feel good about themselves, and to feel good about themselves, they have to declare their altruism to themselves. And the louder, the more committed it is. All right. Could effective altruism's math ever destroy itself by finding an algorithm that figures out self-interest results in higher quality of life? Yes, but they'd reject it. They wouldn't accept the algorithm. They wouldn't accept the algorithm because they take as a given that you shouldn't be self-interested. That is the starting point. So if the result turned out to be, oh, but you should be self-interested, they would reject it. Some evolutionary psychologist guys come to the conclusion that the left really hate game theory, sexual politics. For example, repeated games predict self-interest, but important reports of repetition and honesty. Yeah, I think there is some of that evolutionary psychologists come to that conclusions. But they don't come to that conclusions and then say self-interest is moral. They say, well, self-interest has a role. Self-interest actually, we've evolved in a way that self-interest actually produces okay results. Good results for society, for the community, for other people. But that again is, they frame it in a way that the good is others. The good can never be you. And yeah, and of course they have to put all kinds of constraints like repetition and so on. But the fact is that game theory, we can see game theory at work. People, where the prisoner dilemmas in life. Are people really, because it's not repeatable, when people travel to foreign countries and meet people for the first time and only time in their life, they treat them like shit because, hey, I'm not going to repeat the game. Do we lie to people that we're never going to meet again? Is that good? Is that healthy? No, none of that is true. So, yeah, I mean, it's true that the more honest researchers discovered that self-interest is actually good for, quote, society, like Adam Smith believed. But that's not what it's good for. Self-interest is good because it's good for you. That's what it means. And what does self-interest mean? They also have a perverse view of self-interest as typically short-term, within the particular context of a game. No, self-interest, as we've talked about many, many times, as I've talked about in the Iran Rules series and more importantly in the Ayn Rand review of the virtues, self-interest is work. Self-interest requires effort, thinking. Right? Yeah, Frank says we have institutions of collaboration that beat the prisoner's dilemma. Yes, but we have all kinds of ways to beat the prisoner's dilemma. And the fact is the prisoner's dilemma only works in a closed system. We have an open, life is open. People talk to one another. We can escape prisoner's dilemmas in a variety of different ways, including by creating certain institutions that solve that problem.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize, I know this is difficult, can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right, all right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind. that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it, but at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this, and you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share, and you can support the show at JeronBrookShow.com/support, or on Patreon, or Subscribestar, or Locals. And show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.